The handcuffs clicked around Kesha Benton's wrists as Officer Malloy smirked. She maintained her composure despite the planted evidence. Little did he know, 3 separate recording devices captured everything. Operation Blue Corruption was about to claim its biggest fish yet. Her team waited just blocks away. Where are you watching from today? Before we dive into this shocking true story of justice and corruption, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories exposing the truth behind systemic racism in America. Now let me tell you how this all began. Kesha Benton, a brilliant 34-year-old FBI agent with a law degree from Howard University, sat nervously in the wood-paneled conference room at the Washington, D.C. FBI headquarters. The blinds were drawn tight and the air felt heavy with anticipation. Director Marcus Hayes, a stern man with salt and pepper hair and 25 years of service, entered with a thick file folder and nodded at Kesha. "Agent Benton, thank you for coming on short notice." He slid the folder across the polished table. "We've identified disturbing patterns in Riverdale County, a suburban area outside Atlanta. Multiple black citizens have been wrongfully convicted based on fabricated evidence." Kesha opened the file, her stomach tightening as she reviewed case after case. The same name appeared repeatedly, Officer James Malloy. "This isn't coincidence." Hayes continued, his voice low and grave. "We believe Malloy is the ringleader of a corruption network targeting black professionals who move into what they consider their neighborhoods." Photos lined the table. Doctors, lawyers, engineers. All black, all convicted of crimes they didn't commit. "We've been building a case for months, but we need someone on the inside. Someone who can document this corruption firsthand." Kesha stared at a photo of a young black woman being led away in handcuffs, her face a mask of confusion and terror. "I'll do it," she said without hesitation. The memory of her brother Marcus flooded back. Wrongfully arrested at 19, his promising future derailed by a planted gun and a racist system that never gave him a fair chance. Hayes looked surprised. "It's dangerous, Benton. These officers have connections throughout the justice system. If your cover is blown, all the more reason to stop them," Kesha interrupted. "My brother never recovered from what happened to him. I won't let these officers destroy more lives." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of intensive preparation. Kesha was given a new identity as a pharmaceutical sales representative relocating to Riverdale County. The FBI tech team created an elaborate digital footprint, social media accounts dating back years, professional credentials, credit history, even phone records showing calls to fictional friends and family. Kesha spent hours memorizing every detail of her cover story while studying the profiles of the corrupt officers. Officer Malloy's file revealed a disturbing pattern. He specifically targeted black professionals who had recently moved to the area, especially women living alone. The file included complaints of excessive force, inappropriate searches, and evidence tampering, all dismissed by internal affairs or buried by sympathetic supervisors. As Kesha packed her bags for the assignment, her handler, Agent Diana Torres, reviewed final details. "Remember minimal contact with us. Everything goes through encrypted channels. Your apartment and car are fitted with state-of-the-art recording devices. If anything feels off, use the emergency protocols." Kesha nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I understand the risks. These officers have been operating with impunity for too long." 3 days later, Kesha moved into a mid-range apartment in the Oak Ridge complex in Riverdale County. The neighborhood was tree-lined and pleasant, with a mix of families and professionals. She spent the first day unpacking and setting up surveillance, carefully positioning cameras to monitor approaches to her door. Within days, she experienced the first hints that something was off. Her neighbor, an older white woman, asked probing questions about where she really came from and seemed surprised that Kesha could afford the apartment. At the local grocery store, a security guard followed her through the aisles. Small incidents, but they confirmed what the FBI had told her. This community had underlying tensions. Kesha began her operation in earnest, making strategic appearances around town. She visited the coffee shop frequented by local police dressed in professional attire with her pharmaceutical company badge visible. She joined the gym where several officers worked out and took evening jogs past the police station. Each move was calculated to make herself visible without arousing suspicion. Every night she documented her observations and sent encrypted reports. Phase 1 complete, she wrote on her 7th day. Establishing presence in target community. No direct contact with subject Malloy yet, but groundwork laid for accidental encounters. As she closed her laptop, Kesha glanced at the photo of her brother she kept by her bed. "This is for you, Marcus," she whispered, "and for everyone else they've hurt." The morning sun filtered through the blinds as Kesha prepared for her day, carefully selecting a professional outfit that would help her blend in while remaining noticeable to her targets. She'd been in Riverdale County for 10 days now, establishing her routines and building her cover identity. Today, she would continue making herself visible in the community, focusing on locations where local law enforcement frequently appeared. The Bell Street Coffee Shop was her first stop, a cozy establishment known to be popular with police officers coming off the night shift. Kesha ordered a complex coffee drink, making friendly small talk with the barista while mentioning she was new to town. "Just moved here for work," she said loudly enough to be overheard by the 2 uniformed officers in the corner booth. "Pharmaceutical sales. I'm still learning my way around." She took her time at a table near the officers, scrolling through her phone while subtly observing their conversation. Another one of Jackson's arrests got thrown out. One officer muttered, "Judge said the evidence chain was compromised." The second officer snorted, "Maybe if the perps stopped moving into our neighborhoods, we wouldn't have these problems." Kesha noted the exchange in her mental log, careful not to react visibly. Over the next week, she established predictable patterns designed to make her movements easy to track. Each morning, she jogged the same route through Riverdale Park, passing the police station at precisely 7:15. Her lunch breaks happened at one of 3 restaurants near the courthouse. She visited the same grocery store every Wednesday evening. The routines served 2 purposes. They made her trackable, and they made her appear to have nothing to hide. The first direct contact came on day 14. Kesha was driving home from her fictitious sales meeting when flashing lights appeared in her rearview mirror. She pulled over promptly, heart racing despite her extensive training. "License and registration," the officer demanded without explanation. Kesha complied calmly, watching as Officer Peterson, according to his nameplate, scrutinized her documentation with unusual thoroughness. "Do you know why I pulled you over, Ms. Benton?" "No, sir, I don't," she replied politely. "You were doing 43 in a 40 zone." The minor infraction seemed a flimsy excuse for a stop. Peterson ran her license with deliberate slowness, returning to his cruiser for nearly 15 minutes. When he returned, his demeanor had subtly changed. "So you're new to Riverdale County, living at Oak Ridge Apartments?" "Yes, moved in 2 weeks ago. I travel this area for work." Peterson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Pharmaceutical sales must pay well. Those are nice apartments." "I do all right," Kesha answered with a practiced smile. "The company helps with relocation costs." Peterson handed back her documents without issuing a ticket. "Welcome to Riverdale. Drive carefully." As she pulled away, Kesha noted the officer speaking into his radio while watching her car. The encounter was brief but significant. Her cover identity had now entered police awareness. In the days that followed, she noticed unmarked police vehicles occasionally trailing her at a distance. A dark blue sedan with tinted windows parked across from her apartment building for hours at a time. They were watching her just as she'd intended. Kesha secured additional recording devices throughout her apartment and vehicle, documenting the increasing police presence around her. She used counter-surveillance techniques when necessary, taking indirect routes and occasionally checking for followers. One evening, she spotted a flyer for a community safety meeting at the local library. The featured speaker was Officer James Malloy, head of the Community Engagement Division. This was her opportunity for first contact with her primary target. The meeting room was half filled with local residents when Kesha arrived, choosing a seat with good visibility. Officer Malloy stood at the front, tall and imposing in his crisp uniform, his close-cropped gray hair and hard blue eyes projecting authority. During his presentation about neighborhood watch programs, his gaze repeatedly drifted to Kesha, noticing the newcomer. After the formal presentation, Malloy worked the room, shaking hands and chatting with residents. He made his way to Kesha with practiced casualness. "I don't believe we've met, Officer James Malloy." His handshake was firm, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Kesha Benton. Just moved here from Chicago." "What brings you to our little community, Ms. Benton?" "Work. I'm in pharmaceutical sales. Riverdale County is part of my territory now." Malloy's interest visibly increased. "Pharmaceuticals that must give you access to some valuable inventory." Kesha nodded, playing her role perfectly. "We service all the major medical facilities in the region. I'm often the last one out of some very well-stocked supply rooms." She laughed as if sharing a harmless observation. "The security procedures can be a real pain." "I imagine so," Malloy replied, studying her. "Do you live nearby?" "Oak Ridge Apartments just moved in, still getting settled." "Single woman new to town, you should be careful. We've had some incidents with new residents recently." The warning carried an undercurrent that raised the hairs on Kesha's neck. "I appreciate the concern, officer. Maybe you could give me some safety tips sometime." She handed him a business card with her cover identity's information. "I'm usually home after 7 except Thursdays when I inventory supplies at Atlanta General." The deliberate sharing of her schedule was bait, and Malloy took it, pocketing her card. "I'll check in on you, Ms. Benton. Make sure you're settling in safely." That night, Kesha sent an encrypted update to her handler. "First contact established with primary target. Subject showed immediate interest in pharmaceutical access and my living situation. Surveillance on my residence has increased. Moving to Phase 2. The trap was baited. Now she waited for Malloy to make his move. The unmarked police cruiser had been parked across from Kesha's apartment for 3 hours now. The second time this week, someone was watching her building. She pretended not to notice as she returned from her morning jog, but carefully documented the license plate with a hidden camera in her running watch. Inside her apartment, she reviewed the growing surveillance logs. Officer Malloy had been busy since their meeting last week, running background checks on her cover identity and driving past her apartment at least 5 times. The FBI support team monitoring her surveillance equipment confirmed increased police interest in her movements. Kesha was in the laundry room when a friendly voice interrupted her thoughts. "You must be the new neighbor in 3B. I'm Daniel from 2A." The man extended his hand with an easy smile. Kesha recognized him from her briefing materials, Daniel Williams, a cousin of one of Malloy's fellow officers. This was no coincidence. "Kesha, nice to meet you." They chatted about the building and neighborhood, while folding clothes, Daniel mentioning a local restaurant with great happy hour specials. "Actually," he continued, "my buddy and I are grabbing drinks there tonight. You should join us, meet some locals." The trap was transparent, but precisely what Kesha had been working toward. That evening at Cooper's Bar and Grill, Daniel, coincidentally, introduced her to his friend, Officer Carl Williams. The family resemblance was subtle but unmistakable. Williams was in civilian clothes but carried himself with the unmistakable posture of law enforcement. "Carl works for the Riverdale Police Department," Daniel explained, "keeping us all safe. Williams smiled, playing the role of the friendly neighborhood cop. "Always happy to welcome new residents. What brought you to Riverdale, Kesha?" The conversation that followed was a carefully choreographed dance. Williams asked seemingly innocent questions about her work, her schedule, her apartment security system. Kesha provided carefully crafted answers, mentioning valuable pharmaceutical shipments she sometimes kept overnight, and her upcoming business trip. "I'll be at a conference in Charlotte Thursday through Sunday," she mentioned, always nervous leaving my apartment unattended in a new place. Williams offered reassurances and safety tips, his eyes calculating behind his friendly expression. The next morning, Kesha received a call from a delivery service claiming they had a package requiring signature, but she'd need to come to their facility across town. The caller was insistent, claiming the package contained sensitive materials for her company. It was a clumsy attempt to get her away from her apartment. "I can't possibly make it there today," she insisted. "Could you try again tomorrow?" After ending the call, she pretended to leave, making a show of driving away, but circling back to a surveillance position with clear view of her building. Within 40 minutes, a maintenance van pulled up. The worker who emerged wore the complex uniform, but Kesha didn't recognize him from the staff photos she'd memorized. Through high-powered binoculars, she observed him attempting to access her apartment door, testing the lock with what appeared to be a specialized tool. Her hidden cameras would be capturing everything. After 15 minutes of failed attempts, the man left speaking into a phone as he returned to his van. That night, FBI surveillance teams photographed Officer Malloy meeting with Williams and the fake maintenance worker in a parking lot 5 miles away. The photos, transmitted to Kesha's secure tablet, showed the men reviewing what appeared to be a building schematic. The operation against her was accelerating. The next morning, Kesha discovered the first planted evidence. During her routine security check of her vehicle, she found a small bag containing white powder tucked into her glove compartment. Using specialized equipment, she documented the placement, took samples for the FBI lab, then removed the planted drugs. They were getting bolder, but also more desperate. Have you ever wondered how far corrupt officers will go to frame an innocent person? Comment number 1, if you believe police corruption like this happens more often than we realize, or number 2, if you think these are just isolated incidents. While you're at it, please like and subscribe to support more stories that expose injustice. I know this story seems unbelievable, but wait until you see what Officer Malloy does next. Would you have the courage to continue the mission knowing what they were planning? At her pharmaceutical office, a cover location established by the FBI, Kesha noticed subtle signs of intrusion despite the sophisticated security system. A desk drawer slightly ajar, chair height, adjusted fingerprint dust barely visible on glass surfaces. They had searched her workspace too likely, looking for more evidence to use against her. She documented everything while maintaining her cover, appearing oblivious to the mounting surveillance. In her next encrypted report, Kesha outlined her counter-strategy. Subject is accelerating timeline for frame-up operation, implementing visibility reduction protocol and false schedule to create opportunity for more significant action from target. She deliberately created a paper trail indicating she would attend an overnight pharmaceutical conference the following week, booking hotel reservations and requesting time off. Meanwhile, the FBI technical team installed additional surveillance equipment throughout her apartment and car, preparing to capture the inevitable escalation. Officer Malloy began appearing at locations Kesha frequented: her morning coffee shop, the grocery store, even her gym. Each accidental encounter seemed casual, but his questions grew increasingly pointed. During one workout session, he appeared on the treadmill beside her. "Pharmaceutical sales must be interesting work," he commented between controlled breaths. "Do many of your colleagues use the products they sell? I hear prescription drug abuse is common in high-pressure sales environments." The implication was clear, and Kesha responded with carefully calibrated indignation. "That's a pretty offensive assumption, Officer Malloy. My company has strict ethical standards. Malloy raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just making conversation. We see a lot of unexpected problems in nice neighborhoods like yours. People with good jobs making bad decisions." As the week progressed, Kesha meticulously documented her own whereabouts, creating irrefutable evidence of her activities to counter any false accusations. Security cameras, time-stamped receipts, witness interactions, all would serve as her protection when Malloy made his move. The warning came unexpectedly. A note slipped under her apartment door contained a single sentence: "They're building a case against you. Get out while you can." Analysis by the FBI lab identified the handwriting as belonging to Officer Rebecca Martinez, a recent transfer to the department who had been keeping her distance from Malloy's group. A potential whistleblower or another trap, Kesha couldn't be certain, but the operation was clearly entering its next phase. The frame-up was coming, and soon. The door to Kesha's apartment stood slightly ajar when she returned from her morning run. Her heart raced as she approached cautiously, hand moving instinctively toward the concealed weapon she wasn't carrying as part of her cover. She entered slowly, senses heightened, taking in the subtle signs of intrusion. Nothing was obviously disturbed, but to her trained eye, the apartment had been expertly searched. Cushions sat at slightly different angles, books aligned too perfectly, the scent of unfamiliar cologne lingering in the air. She activated her secure tablet, reviewing footage from her hidden cameras. 3 men had entered using a master key, led by Officer Malloy himself. They wore gloves and moved with practiced efficiency, searching drawers and closets before Malloy placed several items in her bedroom and bathroom. The FBI analysis team confirmed what she suspected: they had planted fingerprints and DNA evidence likely connected to an existing crime. More disturbing, they had installed what appeared to be their own surveillance devices. Kesha left these untouched, feeding them the performance they expected while using counter-surveillance measures to secure her real communications. The escalation continued that afternoon when a police cruiser pulled her over on Maple Street. Officer Malloy approached her window, his expression stern. "License and registration, Ms. Benton." No explanation for the stop, no pretense of a traffic violation. Kesha complied, maintaining her cover as a confused but cooperative civilian. "Is something wrong, officer?" Malloy didn't respond, instead ordering her out of the vehicle. "I need to search your car, Ms. Benton. We've received reports of a vehicle matching this description involved in a drug transaction." The lie was transparent. "I don't consent to a search," Kesha stated firmly, knowing her refusal would be ignored, but establishing it for the record. "I haven't done anything wrong." Malloy's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's not for you to decide." He conducted an aggressive search while a second officer blocked her from returning to her vehicle. The hidden cameras in her car captured Malloy's growing frustration as he found nothing incriminating. The planted evidence from earlier in the week had been removed. His hand slammed the glove compartment shut. "You're being careful," he said, voice low enough that only her hidden microphone caught it, "but not careful enough." Before releasing her, Malloy leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. "We know what you're doing in those hospitals after hours. Even well-dressed criminals still get locked up. Some of the worst offenders wear the nicest clothes." The threat hung in the air as he returned to his cruiser without issuing a citation. The encounter marked a turning point. Over the next 3 days, Kesha experienced escalating harassment. Patrol cars followed her openly throughout town, parking outside businesses when she entered, activating sirens when she walked nearby. At the grocery store, employees watched nervously as 2 uniformed officers trailed her through the aisles. The message was clear to everyone: this woman is trouble. Her FBI handler, contacted through secure channels, confirmed the pattern matched previous cases. "They're isolating you socially," Agent Torres explained, "making you a visible target, someone businesses and neighbors will avoid. It's how they broke down previous victims before the frame-up." Kesha discovered her mail had been tampered with when she received an eviction notice that the property manager knew nothing about and a letter supposedly from her pharmaceutical company questioning inventory discrepancies. These psychological tactics had likely worn down previous victims until they were too isolated and frightened to fight back effectively. The FBI team identified the expanding network of officers involved in Malloy's corruption ring. Beyond Williams and Peterson, 3 more officers regularly participated in the surveillance, along with a courthouse clerk who processed fraudulent warrants. All evidence pointed to Malloy as the orchestrator, but the operation had protection from somewhere higher in the chain of command. While shopping at Riverdale Market, Kesha noticed a patrol car idling at the entrance. Inside, Officer Peterson shadowed her movements, speaking into his radio when she reached the pharmacy section. As she exited the store, 2 additional officers, coincidentally, arrived, creating an intimidating presence. A planned confrontation, she realized, designed to provoke a reaction they could use against her. Kesha carefully maintained her composure, neither engaging nor appearing intimidated as she loaded her groceries and drove away. That evening, she returned home to find 5 traffic citations had been delivered to her door, all claiming violations that hadn't occurred. The following morning, her pharmaceutical company, Cover Identity, received a call questioning her background and credentials. The systematic dismantling of her life had begun. "They're accelerating their timeline," her handler warned during an encrypted video call. "The pattern suggests they're moving toward the final frame-up faster than with previous targets. Your resistance is making them nervous." Kesha nodded, studying the evidence wall she'd created in her secured bathroom, the one room swept daily for surveillance devices. "Time to appear vulnerable," she agreed. "Give them the opening they're looking for." The next day, she staged a loud public argument with a coworker in the parking lot of her office building, knowing Malloy's surveillance team would be watching. She portrayed a woman under immense stress, her composure finally cracking. "I can't take this anymore," she shouted for the benefit of nearby witnesses. "Everyone watching me, questioning me, I've done nothing wrong." The performance was calculated to signal a breaking point, someone becoming desperate enough to make mistakes. As she drove away, tears streaming down her face for the benefit of anyone observing, she noticed Malloy's unmarked car pulling into traffic behind her. The fish was taking the bait. The frame-up was coming, and when it did, she would be ready. The Riverside Steakhouse was known for its dim lighting and private booths, making it a favorite for business meetings and intimate conversations. It also provided excellent sightlines to the parking lot, which was why Kesha chose it for dinner that Tuesday evening. Halfway through her meal, she spotted Officer Malloy's car pulling into the far corner of the lot. Through the window, she observed him meeting with 2 men whose faces she recognized from FBI files, Marcus Jenkins and Terrell Washington, known drug dealers who operated with surprising immunity in Riverdale County. The men spoke briefly, something exchanged between them before they separated. Kesha activated the high-resolution camera concealed in her purse, capturing the entire interaction. This was the connection they'd suspected but hadn't been able to prove. Malloy wasn't just framing innocent people. He was actively collaborating with actual criminals. The evidence was transmitted instantly to her FBI team. She finished her meal unhurriedly, maintaining her cover while documenting Malloy's movements. He remained in his vehicle for nearly 30 minutes after the dealers left, making calls and reviewing papers. Planning the next move against her, she suspected. She didn't have to wait long to find out what it was. At 6:15 the following morning, the door to her apartment crashed open with a splintering sound. "Police search warrant! Get on the ground now!" 6 officers stormed in, weapons drawn, shouting contradictory orders as they surrounded her bed where she had been sleeping. Kesha complied immediately, knowing resistance would only escalate the situation. Officer Malloy entered last, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he surveyed the scene. "Kesha Benton, we have a warrant to search these premises for illegal narcotics and stolen pharmaceutical products." and the officers conducted a destructive search, pulling cushions apart, emptying drawers onto the floor, breaking items with calculated, accidental force. Neighbors gathered in the hallway, watching as the dramatic scene unfolded. Within minutes, an officer called out from the bathroom, "Sir, found something." Malloy approached with theatrical slowness, examining the discovered packages of white powder and prescription bottles hidden in the toilet tank. Items he himself had planted during the previous break-in, all captured on Kesha's hidden cameras. "Well, well," he said loudly for the benefit of witnesses. "Looks like someone's been sampling the company product." Another officer emerged from the bedroom closet. "Got more here, sir, and a list of what looks like clients." More planted evidence, each item carefully documented by Kesha's surveillance system. Malloy turned to her, still kneeling on the floor in her pajamas. "Kesha Benton, you're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute controlled substances and theft of medical supplies." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Malloy leaned close. "Should have stayed in your own neighborhood," he whispered, his voice carrying a distinct racial undertone. "People like you don't belong here." The neighbors watched as Kesha was led out in handcuffs, some filming on their phones, others whispering among themselves. The arrest had been staged for maximum public impact, ensuring her reputation in the community was destroyed regardless of the legal outcome. At the police station, the degradation continued. Kesha was denied her phone call, held in processing for hours without explanation. When finally brought to an interrogation room, she found Malloy waiting with a thick file folder and a video player. "Quite the operation you've been running, Ms. Benton," he began, his tone conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "Using your pharmaceutical position to steal medications and sell them. Very entrepreneurial." Kesha maintained her cover, expressing confused outrage. "This is insane. I haven't stolen anything. I don't know where those drugs came from, but they aren't mine." Malloy smiled, enjoying her protests. "Save it. We have everything we need." He played a video showing someone in a lab coat removing items from a storage cabinet. The figure's face wasn't clearly visible, but the build and clothing were clearly meant to suggest Kesha. "That's not me," she stated flatly. "It doesn't even look like me." "Camera quality isn't great," Malloy acknowledged with false sympathy, "but the jury will see what they need to see. Black woman stealing from her employer. It's a familiar story around here." The racial component of his frame-up was becoming increasingly explicit. "I want a lawyer," Kesha demanded. "This is harassment and racial profiling." Malloy laughed. "Playing the race card already. Your kind always does. This isn't about race. It's about crime, and you're going away for a long time." He outlined the charges against her: felony possession, theft, distribution of controlled substances. "Your pharmaceutical license will be revoked, of course, 5 to 10 years minimum, unless—" He let the word hang in the air. "Unless what?" Malloy leaned forward. "Unless you have something to offer. Information, names, other people like you who might be involved in similar activities." The real purpose emerged. He wanted her to help frame others. When she refused, Malloy shrugged and left her alone in the interrogation room for 3 more hours. The public defender, who eventually arrived, seemed suspiciously uninterested in the details of her case. Jacob Winters, a tired-looking man with rumpled clothes, barely made eye contact as he reviewed the charges. "Evidence looks pretty solid," he muttered, not bothering to write down her assertions of innocence. "I'll see about a plea deal, maybe get it down to 3 years if you cooperate." Kesha recognized him from the FBI file. Winters had represented 6 previous victims of Malloy's frame-ups, delivering inadequate defense in each case. Another piece of the corruption puzzle. When finally granted her phone call, Kesha dialed a number that activated an emergency FBI protocol. The seemingly normal conversation with her sister contained coded language, alerting her team to the arrest and setting response procedures in motion. The holding cell they placed her in contained 3 other women, all facing serious charges. One, a heavy-set woman with prison tattoos, immediately began making threatening comments. Another staged intimidation tactic Kesha realized designed to break her spirit. The night passed slowly, Kesha documenting every procedural violation while maintaining her cover as a frightened civilian. By morning, news of her arrest had reached local media. Officer Peterson made a point of showing her the inflammatory headline on his phone, "Pharmaceutical Rep Arrested in Major Drug Bust." The article quoted police sources claiming she had been using her professional position to steal and distribute painkillers throughout Riverdale County. Her reputation was being systematically destroyed, just as had happened with previous victims. That evening, surveillance teams documented Malloy and his associates celebrating at the Blue Line, a bar frequented by police officers. Hidden microphones captured damning conversations. "Another one down," Williams toasted. "The neighborhood gets cleaner every month." Malloy laughed. "This one was too easy. Thought she was so smart with her fancy job. They all think they belong until we show them they don't." Peterson raised his glass. "To keeping Riverdale the way it should be." The racial subtext was unmistakable, captured perfectly for the federal case that was building by the hour. As Kesha spent her first night in jail, the FBI operation was accelerating behind the scenes. The trap had been sprung, but not the one Officer Malloy had intended. The concrete bench in holding cell number 3 had been Kesha's bed for the past 27 hours. Despite the discomfort, she had used the time productively connecting with other inmates and gathering testimonies. "Malloy planted that gun in my car," whispered Janelle, a nursing student arrested 3 months earlier. "I never even touched a firearm in my life, but they found one with my fingerprints." Similar stories emerged from 2 other women, both black professionals, who had recently moved to Riverdale County, both maintaining their innocence despite mounting legal pressure. Kesha committed each detail to memory, building the broader pattern of corruption. At 11:30 the next morning, a guard appeared. "Benton, your bail's been posted, processing for release." Kesha concealed her surprise. According to protocol, the FBI wouldn't have arranged bail this quickly, as it might raise suspicion. In the release area, she discovered the payment had been made anonymously, another piece of the puzzle to solve. The sunlight felt surreal after the fluorescent harshness of the jail. No FBI contact was visible, but she sensed her team nearby maintaining surveillance. Following procedure for her cover, she called a rideshare to take her home, maintaining the appearance of a shell-shocked citizen just released from custody. The apartment complex fell silent as she walked through the courtyard. Neighbors who had previously greeted her now hurried inside, blinds closing as she passed. The social isolation was immediate and calculated. Inside her unit, the destruction from the raid remained untouched. Furniture overturned, personal items, broken clothes strewn across the floor. On the living room wall, spray painted in red, "Drug dealer," and a racial slur. The vandalism wasn't random. It matched patterns from previous cases, another intimidation tactic in Malloy's playbook. Kesha documented everything, knowing each element strengthened the federal case. After securing her apartment, she slipped into the bathroom, the one room swept daily for surveillance devices. Behind a loose tile, she retrieved her secure satellite phone and contacted her FBI handler. "Operation compromised?" she asked immediately. "Negative," Agent Torres responded. Anonymous bail payment traced to Officer Rebecca Martinez using a shell account. She's making moves independent of Malloy's crew. Continue as planned. Torres outlined the broader investigation progress. "We've identified 23 similar cases over the past 30 months, all black professionals, all recent arrivals to the county. 18 convictions, most pleading guilty under pressure." The pattern was even more extensive than initially believed. "We've also found connections to Westlake Development Corporation. They've purchased properties at below-market rates after owners were arrested or fled under police pressure." The real estate angle provided motive beyond racism financial gain through neighborhood demographic control. Kesha changed into casual clothes, careful to maintain her cover as she moved around the apartment. For any watching eyes, she appeared devastated, occasionally breaking into tears, jumping at sudden noises. The performance was calculated to show a woman on the edge, her life crumbling around her. The next phase required public visibility. Kesha visited several locations where she knew she would be observed by Malloy's surveillance team. She met with a bail bondsman, although her bail had already been paid. She consulted with 3 different defense attorneys, appearing increasingly desperate with each meeting. She began selling personal items, suggesting financial distress. Each movement was carefully choreographed to create the impression of a woman spiraling downward, becoming vulnerable to manipulation. On the 4th day after her arrest, the expected contact came. Officer Malloy appeared beside her at a convenience store near the courthouse. "Rough week?" he asked, false sympathy dripping from his voice. Kesha flinched, playing her role. "Why are you doing this to me? Those drugs weren't mine. You know that." Malloy shrugged, selecting a coffee from the machine. "System's tough when you're on the wrong side of it, but sometimes there are ways to make problems smaller." He handed her a business card with a time and address written on the back. "If you want to discuss options, be there tomorrow, alone." The meeting location was a park on the outskirts of town, secluded but public enough to avoid suspicion. Perfect for her purposes. Wearing sophisticated recording equipment disguised as ordinary jewelry, Kesha arrived 5 minutes early, projecting nervous energy for anyone watching. Malloy appeared precisely on time, suggesting he'd been observing her arrival. "Walk with me," he instructed, leading her toward a wooded trail away from potential witnesses. "Your situation is serious, Ms. Benton. Felony charges, strong evidence, mandatory minimums. Your career is over either way." Kesha wrapped her arms around herself, appearing defeated. "What do you want from me?" "Information," Malloy replied smoothly. "Names of other pharmaceutical reps who might be involved in similar activities, particularly new arrivals to the county, people like yourself." The recruitment attempt confirmed another aspect of the operation Malloy used, forced cooperation from previous victims to identify new targets. "I don't know anyone doing anything illegal," Kesha protested. "I told you I'm innocent." Malloy's expression hardened. "No one's innocent, but some people are useful." He outlined his proposition help identify new targets, particularly in the Wellington Heights neighborhood where several black professionals had recently purchased homes, and her own charges might be reduced. "The DA listens to me. Cooperate, and maybe you serve 6 months instead of 6 years." Every word was being recorded, building the federal case with each self-incriminating statement. Kesha hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I might know some people, but I need guarantees." "Smart girl." Malloy smiled, the condescension thick in his voice. "We'll talk specifics soon. Meanwhile, stay available, and keep our arrangement to yourself." As Malloy walked away, Kesha allowed herself a momentary break from character, her eyes hardening as she watched his retreating figure. The hunter had no idea he had become the prey. Have you ever noticed how corrupt people become? Overconfident. Comment number 1, if you think Malloy's arrogance will be his downfall, or number 2, if you believe corrupted power usually finds a way to escape justice. While you're sharing your thoughts, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories of justice being served against systematic oppression. The question now is, how much deeper does this corruption go, and will Kesha be able to bring down the entire network? While Kesha continued building her case against Malloy, the FBI team expanded their investigation. Financial records revealed judges and prosecutors with suspicious deposits corresponding to case dismissals against Malloy's allies and harsh sentences for his targets. Property records showed a pattern of home foreclosures and distressed sales in neighborhoods where black professionals had been arrested with properties often purchased by subsidiaries of Westlake Development. The conspiracy was broader and more organized than initially suspected. Officer Rebecca Martinez made contact through an encrypted channel, having discovered Kesha's true identity through her own investigation. "I've been documenting the corruption for 14 months, she revealed during a clandestine meeting in a neighboring county. "Started after they framed a doctor who treated my mother. I couldn't prove it was wrongful, but I knew something was off." Martinez provided a flash drive containing internal communications patrol patterns showing targeted harassment and evidence of evidence tampering. "They call it neighborhood preservation," she explained bitterly. "It's about keeping certain areas white and property values high for their developer friends." With Martinez's cooperation secured, the operation gained inside information about department operations. Meanwhile, Kesha continued her performance as a desperate woman willing to cooperate. During subsequent meetings with Malloy, she gathered crucial evidence about how evidence was falsified and cases were rigged. "We have friends in the DA's office, the courthouse, even the crime lab," Malloy boasted during one recorded conversation. "Paperwork gets adjusted, evidence chains get modified. Witnesses remember things differently after we talk to them." The final piece fell into place when Malloy revealed the full extent of his network. "We've got 7 judges who understand the program. File with the right court, you get the outcome you need. That's how we keep the neighborhood the way it should be." The operation was approaching its culmination. Kesha had the evidence needed to expose not just Malloy, but the entire corrupt system supporting him. The trap was set, and the predator was walking straight into it. The FBI safe house looked like any other suburban home in the neighboring county, but inside a command center hummed with activity. 30 agents coordinated the final phase of Operation Blue Corruption, now expanded far beyond the initial investigation of Officer Malloy. Special Agent Diana Torres led the briefing, Kesha at her side. "We've identified 52 individuals in the corruption network," Torres explained, indicating photographs covering the wall. 7 police officers, 4 prosecutors, 3 judges, 11 court employees, and various accomplices, including real estate developers and their associates. The evidence Kesha had gathered over 2 months had expanded the case exponentially. Agent Benton's undercover work has given us the foundation for federal charges, including civil rights violations, evidence tampering, conspiracy, extortion, and racketeering. The team reviewed the sting operation designed to catch the key players in actionable offenses. Malloy believes Agent Benton has agreed to help frame other residents and provide access to valuable pharmaceuticals. Torres continued, "She's convinced him she has access to a shipment of opioid painkillers worth approximately $300,000 street value." The bait was set. Malloy had arranged to meet Kesha at a storage facility where she claimed to have diverted the pharmaceutical shipment. The location had been prepared with comprehensive surveillance equipment, and FBI teams would be positioned throughout the area. "Remember," Torres cautioned, "we need explicit statements of criminal intent from Malloy and his associates. They need to clearly indicate knowledge of the frame-up operation and their roles in it." Kesha nodded, tension evident in her shoulders despite months of training and preparation. "He's careful with his words when sober. That's why I suggested meeting at 8 after his usual happy hour. He's more explicit when he's had a few drinks." And the technical team outfitted Kesha with state-of-the-art recording devices, a necklace with built-in microphone earrings containing transmitters, and a watch with emergency signal capability. Everything had to appear normal while providing multiple recording backups. "Remember your extraction signals," Torres reminded her. "Any indication of danger, use the code word prescription, and we move in immediately." The week leading up to the sting had been intensely active. Kesha met with Malloy multiple times, playing the role of a desperate woman willing to do anything to avoid prison. "I can get you access to the storage unit where we keep overflow inventory," she had told him, voice shaking with manufactured fear. high-grade painkillers ready for distribution, but I need guarantees that my charges disappear. Malloy had been cautious but eager, seeing an opportunity for significant profit. "Bring me something valuable enough, your problems might just go away," he had promised. "And information on others like you moving into Wellington Heights would be very useful." Each meeting had yielded more incriminating evidence, but they needed the final piece: Malloy and his associates taking possession of what they believed were stolen pharmaceuticals while explicitly acknowledging the frame-up operation. As the day of the sting arrived, Kesha maintained her cover, appearing increasingly desperate in public. She sold her car, visited multiple pawnshops, and made visible preparations to flee the area. All calculated to make Malloy believe she was reaching a breaking point, willing to do anything to escape prosecution. The storage facility on Industrial Boulevard was isolated enough for privacy, but close to main roads for quick access. FBI teams secured the surrounding buildings and positioned surveillance teams with clear sight lines to the primary location. Inside Unit 17, cameras and microphones captured every angle of the climate-controlled space. Shelves lined with pharmaceutical boxes created a convincing scene. The products were real but had been appropriately documented and would be returned to legitimate inventory after the operation. At 7:45, Kesha arrived, performing final checks of the recording equipment while maintaining the nervous demeanor of someone committing a desperate act. At 8:07, 3 vehicles pulled into the facility. Malloy emerged from the first officers, Williams and Peterson from the second. The third contained 2 men in civilian clothes, later identified as courthouse employees involved in evidence processing. The network was exposing itself exactly as hoped. "You came with friends," Kesha observed nervously as they approached. "Insurance." Malloy replied with a cold smile. "Show us what you've got." Inside the storage unit, Kesha played her role perfectly, hands shaking as she unlocked the pharmaceutical containers. Premium-grade oxycodone fentanyl patches and hydrocodone, street value around $300,000, enough to make your charges disappear. Malloy examined the merchandise with expert eyes, confirming its authenticity. "Assuming it's all legitimate product." "It is," Kesha insisted. "I diverted it from a hospital delivery. The paperwork shows it as delivered, but I redirected the driver here with a fake authorization." Williams whistled softly. "This is better than your usual operations, James." The first slip acknowledging previous operations. Malloy nodded in satisfaction. "More profitable than our usual approach, though I still need those names in Wellington Heights." "I've got those too," Kesha offered, pulling out a list of fictional new residents. "Black doctor moved in last month, corporate lawyer coming next week, like you asked for." Malloy took the list, examining it with disturbing intensity. "Perfect. New targets, just the kind of people who don't belong in our neighborhoods." The racial motivation was explicitly stated, now recorded from multiple angles. "So, my charges disappear?" Kesha pressed, playing her role to the end. "How does that work? You said you've done this before." "Simple." Malloy explained, his guard lowered by the valuable merchandise before him. "Evidence gets logged incorrectly. Chain of custody forms get modified. We've got people at every step. Your case file will get lost in the system, charges quietly dropped due to insufficient evidence." He gestured to the men in civilian clothes. "These gentlemen handle the paperwork. They've buried dozens of cases against our friends, just like they've ensured convictions for people we want removed." The criminal conspiracy was now explicitly stated and recorded. Williams added, "We've been cleaning up Riverdale County for years, keeping property values high, neighborhoods exclusive. Developers pay well for the service." The final connection to the real estate scheme was confirmed. Peterson laughed. "Remember that professor we set up last year, had his wife and kids crying on the courthouse steps, foreclosed on their house 3 months later. The casual cruelty was chilling, but provided perfect evidence of previous cases. As the men began inventorying the pharmaceutical products preparing to take possession, Malloy turned to Kesha with unexpected intensity. "One more thing. We need you to help with the Wellington Heights operations. Frame the new arrivals just like we did with you. You know the system from both sides now." The moment had come for the final revelation. Kesha straightened her demeanor, transforming from frightened victim to confident federal agent. "I think I have everything I need now, Officer Malloy." She pulled out her badge previously concealed. "FBI Special Agent Kesha Benton. You and your associates are under arrest for conspiracy evidence, tampering civil rights violations, and attempted possession of controlled substances." The shock on Malloy's face quickly transformed to rage as he lunged toward her, but stopped short as FBI agents flooded into the storage unit from concealed positions, weapons drawn. "It was all recorded," Kesha informed him calmly, holding up her necklace. "Every confession, every detail of your operation. It's over." The fluorescent lights of the FBI interrogation room cast harsh shadows across Officer Malloy's face as he sat handcuffed to the metal table. His initial shock had given way to cold fury, his jaw clenched tight enough to strain the muscles in his neck. Across from him, Kesha Benton sat composed in her formal FBI attire. Badge displayed prominently a thick file folder between them. The reversal of power was absolute. "You've been busy, Agent Benton." Malloy finally spoke, voice dripping with contempt. "Quite the performance." Kesha opened the file methodically. "Not as busy as you've been, Officer Malloy. 17 wrongful arrests in 30 months. All black professionals, all recent arrivals to Riverdale County. All framed using nearly identical methods." Malloy leaned back, a practiced casualness betrayed by the tension in his shoulders. "I made legitimate arrests based on evidence. If you're suggesting otherwise, you'll need more than theories." "We have considerably more than theories." Kesha pressed a button on the remote control, activating the wall-mounted screen. Video footage played showing Malloy planting evidence in her apartment, followed by audio recordings of his conversations admitting to frame-ups and the broader conspiracy. As the evidence mounted, Malloy's expression shifted from defiance to calculation. Outside the interrogation room, the scale of the operation became clear. Electronic boards displayed the corruption network in detailed organizational charts. Special Agent Torres coordinated simultaneous raids across Riverdale County, apprehending judges, court officials, and Malloy's police accomplices. The property development connection was being traced through financial records, revealing millions in profits from artificially devalued properties. Back in interrogation, Malloy attempted to regain control. "You entrapped me. This was a setup from the beginning." "Actually, Kesha corrected him. "We investigated existing patterns of corruption. You weren't targeted until substantial evidence already existed, suggesting your involvement in multiple civil rights violations." She laid out photographs of previous victims. Dr. James Watkins framed for prescription fraud. Professor Aisha Johnson framed for possession. Attorney Michael Robinson framed for evidence tampering. All black professionals who purchased homes in neighborhoods you considered off-limits. Malloy's expression hardened. "You're making this about race. It was about protecting communities from crime." "Your own words contradict that claim." Kesha played another recording, Malloy explicitly discussing targeting black residents to keep neighborhoods the way they should be. As the evidence mounted, Malloy shifted strategies, attempting to implicate others. "I was following orders. The chief knew everything. Talk to Captain Briggs if you want the real mastermind." Kesha nodded, unsurprised by the deflection. "We're speaking with everyone involved. Your cooperation could be considered during sentencing recommendations." For a moment, Malloy seemed to consider the offer, then his expression closed. "I want my lawyer. I've got nothing more to say to you." "That's your right," Kesha acknowledged, gathering her materials. Before leaving, she placed a final document before him. "This is a list of every charge currently being prepared against you. Federal charges Officer Malloy. Civil rights violations alone carry 20 years. The conspiracy and RICO charges add significantly more. She let the information sink in. When you speak with your attorney, remember that the first members of your organization to cooperate fully will receive the most consideration. As Malloy was led away to holding Kesha, joined Torres in the command center where the operation continued unfolding. "Malloy's shut down for now," she reported. "But the evidence is overwhelming. His accomplices will start turning on each other once they realize the extent of what we have." Torres nodded, surveying the room of busy agents. "Judge Reynolds is already offering information. Claims he was pressured into signing backdated warrants. The property connection is proving even bigger than we thought. Westlake Development has purchased 27 properties from arrested homeowners in the past 3 years, all at significant discounts." The scale of the corruption was staggering. By evening, 17 arrests had been made, including 3 judges, 2 prosecutors, and 7 police officers. Evidence seizures filled the FBI evidence rooms, falsified warrants, doctored evidence logs, financial records showing suspicious payments. Local media gathered outside the Riverdale County Courthouse as the story broke. The FBI public information officer confirmed an ongoing corruption investigation without revealing specific details. Speculation ran wild as prominent community figures were seen being escorted from their offices in handcuffs. Kesha watched the coverage from the command center, her thoughts with the victims whose lives had been devastated by Malloy's operation. The confrontation wasn't just about arresting corrupt officials, it was about beginning the process of healing the damage they had caused. Later that night, Kesha faced Malloy again in the presence of his attorney, a polished defense lawyer who specialized in representing police officers. "My client maintains his innocence," the attorney began, "and believes this investigation constitutes harassment of dedicated law enforcement professionals." Kesha simply activated the recording equipment again, playing Malloy's explicit confessions and racist statements. The attorney's expression grew increasingly concerned as the evidence mounted. During a private consultation, microphones captured the attorney's harsh whisper, "You didn't tell me they had all this. This is a disaster." When they returned, the attorney's approach had shifted dramatically. "We might be interested in discussing cooperation options, assuming certain sentencing considerations can be arranged." The first crack in Malloy's defense had appeared. As the night progressed, similar scenes played out across multiple interrogation rooms. Officer Williams broke first, offering detailed information about the corruption network in exchange for leniency. Peterson followed then, the court clerk who had falsified documents. The conspiracy was unraveling as each participant scrambled to save themselves. By morning, Malloy found himself increasingly isolated. His former allies were providing evidence against him, portraying him as the ringleader who orchestrated the frame-ups and connected the operation to the property developers. When Kesha entered his cell at dawn, his arrogance had finally crumbled. "What do you want from me?" he asked, voice hollow. "The truth," Kesha replied simply. "The complete truth about every person you framed, every official who helped you, every connection to the property scheme. Names, dates, methods. Everything." Malloy looked up, defeat evident in his posture. "And if I cooperate, I'll inform the prosecutor of your assistance. That's all I can promise." For a moment the corrupt officer seemed to wrestle with his options. Then slowly he began to talk. The confession lasted 4 hours, detailing a corruption scheme that had operated for years before Kesha's investigation began. The confrontation had ended not with dramatic resistance, but with the quiet collapse of a corrupt system exposed to the light of justice. The courtroom fell silent as Kesha Benton approached the witness stand. 6 months had passed since the arrests that rocked Riverdale County, And now the federal trial of Officer James Malloy and his co-conspirators had reached its climactic testimony. Kesha's FBI uniform was impeccable, her composure unshakable as she faced the defendants. Malloy sat between his attorneys, his once commanding presence diminished by months in detention and the weight of overwhelming evidence. The prosecution had built a methodical case presenting financial records, falsified evidence logs, testimony from cooperating witnesses, and the damning recordings Kesha had gathered during her undercover operation. "Agent Benton," the prosecutor began, "please explain to the court how your investigation began." For the next 3 hours, Kesha detailed the operation from its inception. She described the pattern of wrongful convictions that first drew FBI attention, the decision to send her undercover, and the systematic corruption she uncovered. Her testimony was clinical and precise, but the human impact became clear as she described meeting the previous victims. Dr. James Watkins lost his medical license after being framed for prescription fraud. Professor Aisha Johnson spent 11 months in prison before evidence of tampering was discovered. Attorney Michael Robinson still cannot practice law despite his case being dismissed. Throughout her testimony, Malloy avoided eye contact, staring at the table before him. His defense strategy had collapsed after 3 co-defendants agreed to testify against him in exchange for reduced sentences. The courtroom gallery was filled with community members, including many who had been targeted by the corruption ring. Their presence was a silent testament to the lives disrupted by the conspiracy. National media covered the trial extensively, highlighting the intersection of racial discrimination, abuse of power, and real estate manipulation. Outside the courthouse, demonstrations called for systemic reform of law enforcement and judicial oversight. As Kesha completed her testimony, the lead prosecutor displayed the organizational chart of the corruption network on the courtroom screen. 37 individuals ultimately faced charges, including 7 police officers, 4 prosecutors, 3 judges and executives from Westlake Development Corporation. The 2-week trial concluded with closing arguments that emphasized the betrayal of public trust. These individuals didn't just break the law, the prosecutor told the jury. They weaponized the law against innocent citizens based on the color of their skin. They perverted the very system they swore to uphold. The jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all major counts. Malloy was convicted of civil rights violations, conspiracy evidence tampering, attempted possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute, and racketeering. The judge brought in from another district to ensure impartiality, scheduled sentencing for the following month. 2 weeks later, the Department of Justice announced a comprehensive investigation into the entire Riverdale County justice system. Special oversight panels were established to review every case handled by the corrupt officials, with priority given to those currently incarcerated. The real estate connection exposed another dimension of the conspiracy. Westlake Development had systematically profited from the wrongful convictions, purchasing properties at deeply discounted prices when families were forced to sell after breadwinners were imprisoned. Federal charges against the company's executives included conspiracy and civil rights violations. As the cases moved to the sentencing phase, Kesha found herself increasingly involved in the community healing process. The FBI established a special task force dedicated to reviewing potential wrongful convictions, with Kesha appointed as liaison to affected families. On a crisp autumn morning, Kesha visited the Watkins family home. Dr. James Watkins had been the first identified victim of Malloy's operation, framed for prescription fraud 3 years earlier. His medical license had been reinstated following review, but rebuilding his practice and reputation remained challenging. "The hardest part wasn't prison," Dr. Watkins confided as they sat in his living room. "It was knowing someone hated us enough to destroy our lives simply because we moved into their neighborhood." His wife nodded in agreement. "Our children still have nightmares about the raid." Our 14-year-old son doesn't trust any police officer he sees." These conversations were repeated dozens of times as Kesha met with each family affected by the corruption. Some had lost homes, others had marriages strained to breaking point. Careers had been derailed, reputations tarnished, children traumatized. The damage extended far beyond the immediate legal consequences. At the sentencing hearing for Malloy and his key associates, victims were given the opportunity to deliver impact statements. One by one, they described the devastation caused by the corrupt operation. Michael Robinson, the attorney who had been framed for evidence tampering, addressed Malloy directly. "You didn't just attack me as an individual. You attacked the idea that black professionals could live safely in your community. You attacked the promise of equality that this country claims to uphold." When the sentences were announced, they reflected the severity of the crimes. Malloy received 28 years in federal prison. His police accomplices received sentences ranging from 12 to 20 years. The judges and prosecutors who had facilitated the corruption received 8 to 15 years each. The property developers faced both criminal penalties and civil judgments with proceeds designated for victim compensation. Beyond the criminal cases, systemic reforms began taking shape. The Riverdale County Police Department was placed under federal monitoring. New transparency requirements were implemented for warrant applications and evidence handling. A civilian review board was established with actual oversight authority. Most significantly, a judicial review panel began systematically examining every case handled by the corrupt officials. Within 6 months, 17 wrongfully convicted individuals had been released, with dozens more cases under review. Compensation claims were being processed, though no financial settlement could fully restore what had been lost. 1 year after the operation concluded, Kesha stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., receiving a commendation for her work. The ceremony highlighted the broader implications of the case for civil rights enforcement nationwide. Rather than focusing on her own role, Kesha used her acceptance speech to recognize the courage of the victims who had come forward and Officer Rebecca Martinez, whose initial documentation had helped launch the investigation. This case wasn't about one corrupt officer or even one corrupt system, she told the assembled officials and media. It was about confronting the reality that racism can become institutionalized, protected and normalized within the very systems designed to provide justice. The final phase of Kesha's involvement focused on prevention rather than prosecution. She established a mentorship program for young black law students interested in civil rights enforcement, using her experience to inspire a new generation of advocates. The program particularly focused on students from communities most affected by systemic discrimination. During a community forum in Riverdale County, now under new leadership, Kesha addressed residents still healing from the corruption scandal. "True justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoers, she explained. It's about restoring what was taken and preventing future harm. It's about ensuring that no one faces discrimination for simply existing in spaces others want to control." The most meaningful moment came privately after the cameras had gone. Kesha visited her brother Marcus, sharing news of the convictions and the changes being implemented. Years earlier, his wrongful arrest had altered the trajectory of his life and inspired her career choice. "Did it help?" he asked quietly. "Bringing them down?" Kesha considered the question carefully. "It helped some people. It exposed the truth, but there's so much more work to do." Marcus nodded in understanding. "Then keep doing it. For everyone who doesn't have a sister in the FBI to fight for them." As new residents moved into Riverdale County, including black professionals who had previously avoided the area, the community began a slow transformation. The property values that had been artificially manipulated through discrimination stabilized through natural market forces rather than corrupt intervention. The new Community Oversight Board, with Kesha serving as federal liaison, ensured that law enforcement served all residents equally. The story of Riverdale County became a case study in both the persistence of systemic racism and the possibility of meaningful reform when corruption is exposed and addressed. For Kesha, the operation represented not an endpoint, but a beginning, one case among many in the ongoing struggle for equal justice. What would you have done if you were in Kesha's position? Would you have had the courage to continue the undercover operation, knowing the risks? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can continue fighting against systemic racism in our justice system. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, share with others who need to hear these truths, and join our community dedicated to exposing injustice wherever it exists. Thank you for listening to this story of courage, determination, and the ongoing fight for equality in America. This story illustrates the devastating impact of systemic racism when it infiltrates institutions meant to protect all citizens equally. Officer Malloy's corruption wasn't just individual prejudice, it was methodically woven into the justice system through complicit judges, prosecutors, and officials who normalized discrimination as policy. The case demonstrates how racism becomes institutionalized when left unchallenged, creating parallel systems of justice based on skin color. Kesha's journey highlights the critical importance of documentation and evidence in fighting corruption. Without meticulous recording of every interaction, the word of those in power typically prevails over victims. This reality disproportionately affects communities of color who often lack resources to challenge false accusations. The story also reveals how economic interests often drive racial exclusion. The property development scheme shows how racism can be weaponized for financial gain, with vulnerable communities bearing the cost of others' prosperity. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative emphasizes that systemic change requires both institutional accountability and individual courage. One person standing against injustice can ignite transformation, but lasting change demands reformed systems, civilian oversight, and ongoing vigilance. The road to justice is long, but as Kesha demonstrated, confronting corruption directly, rather than accepting its inevitability, is the only path toward a more equitable society for all. What systems of inequality exist in your community that go unchallenged? Have you witnessed or experienced racial profiling from those in positions of authority? I want to hear your stories and thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find this content, and subscribe to join our community dedicated to exposing injustice through powerful storytelling. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how systemic racism operates in real lives. Awareness is the first step toward meaningful change. Thank you for listening with an open heart and mind. Together we can build a world where justice truly means justice for all, regardless of skin color or background. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and never stop fighting for what's right.